You are now watching the Amazing Mets pregame show with your hosts, Rob and CP.
Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets!
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the Amazing Mets pregame show, playoff edition. And we are ready for some playoff baseball here in the country, in Queens. Not Queens exactly, but we got some postseason baseball for us Met fans. The 11th time in franchise history, the Mets are in the playoffs, and take it while you can, guys. Embrace it. We are ready for game one, about 2 hours away until game time. And we're going to break it all down for you, pitch and matchup, lineup, same thing we do all the time. So if you're new to the channels, say what's up, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, guys, and let's get ready for some postseason baseball starting in Milwaukee. The road to the World Series starts in Milwaukee for the New York Mets. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I was just gonna say, Queens does not have postseason baseball just yet. The New York Mets do, because Milwaukee is a hell of a lot different than Queens, New York. So, anyways, great city, by the way. Milwaukee's still great. I was just actually there. So, got to get it done, though. Got to get it done. First stop, first road in this journey is going to be Milwaukee. Obviously, the Mets. This is a team and an organization that the Mets have perpetually struggled with. Over the years, especially this year. Um, you fast forward all the way back to March of this year in that series, right, where you have the whole Rhys Hoskins debacle, Jeff McNeil sliding late into Jeff McNeil. Then you have the pitch behind Rhys Hoskins. In my live chat poll, I actually asked everybody that's a part of my live chat right now to give me your confidence level in Luis Severino, because as you all know, we'll talk about Luis Severino going up against this Milwaukee Brewers lineup that's pretty damn dangerous. He went 5 innings pitched, 11 hits, gave up 3 runs in the first inning. And it was a whole debacle. It kind of went downhill for him in that first start. So again, you fast forward 162 games. Now you're here, game one of the playoffs. It's time to change the narrative. And we've been saying that recently, right? Milwaukee with Atlanta, and just the overall turning around of the clutch gene of the New York Mets when it's time to clutch up and perform late in the season. So we're going to talk about it here. Luis Severino versus Freddie Peralta. Lovely chat, by the way. Everybody in the chat, appreciate you all being here. Oliver, Darren, Ray, John from Pure Adrenaline, Cope. I appreciate you all. Pintrice, D, everybody. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much, Robert. Hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe to both channels if you're over on X. If you're like stuck in this mode during this Tuesday where you can't work, it's the later stage of the workday, and you just want to talk and hear about some New York Mets baseball, come on over to the YouTube. We got you covered, not only for the pregame stream, but also the postgame streams as well. We will be live on the postgame tonight to give you all our instant reactions right after the game concludes. Whether it's a win or whether it's a loss, it's playoff baseball, and we're taking full advantage of being up here talking about this team. So let's get after it.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, Chris, you bring it up all the time. Take game one of a series, right? This is the most obvious thing you can say in the postseason. Look, we know it's the best 2 out of 3, right? You lose that first game, it's not like you have a chance to go back home and kind of figure it out in game. No. All 3 games are on the road for the New York Mets. They're in Milwaukee, so game one is crucial, right? Luckily for us, we won that game, won in Atlanta yesterday, and we saved Severino for today, and we got Manaea tomorrow. So we basically got 2 of our top guys in this series, basically almost how you wanted it, and you got to get it done, right? The lineup, they're clearly going with what they think is going to be the best lineup. They're trying to go with the best offensive lineup. That's obvious, right? Yesterday with the Braves, they tried their best defensive lineup, basically, and then when things were unraveling, they went to their more offensive players in the lineup later in the game, and it worked out for the New York Mets. So to break down the start of the pitching matchup, right? Freddie Peralta, if you go way back to opening day, dominated the New York Mets, right? That was a totally different team. Joey Wendell was on that team. It was such a different team. from April to October 1st, a complete. It seems like a complete overhaul of a roster, even though there wasn't that many changes, even though they kind of were. But you know what? It's a lot of the same guys except for a couple, but it's a totally different team. And with Freddie Peralta, and Chris is gonna give you what he pitches, what he throws, because he's always the man to figure that out and break it down for you. And that's why I let him do it, because I just talk stuff. So Chris, what do you got on Freddie Peralta here going into this game one, and what the Mets got to look for going against them?
Yeah, I did. As I always do, every single time we go up against a starting pitcher, doesn't matter if it's game like 50 or game 160 or the first playoff game of the season, I always take a look at their Savant page. And Freddie Peralta has been a tremendous pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers for quite some time. He kind of got overshadowed by the Corbin Burns and the Brandon Wood, right, in the last couple of years, but this guy is absolutely no joke. I actually, right, before the season, dropped a video about, Freddie Peralta, and if the Brewers falter this season, how I would love David Stearns to go out there and ask them for Freddie Peralta in a potential trade in this upcoming offseason. That's how highly I think of him. But it's quite simple. The approach is the same approach that should have been had against Spencer Schwellenbach. And I'm not going to tell you that Freddie Peralta is having as good of a season, right? Or will have as easy of a time against the Mets lineup as Spencer Schwellenbach did in his first, 3 starts. But the approach is similar, right? Freddie Peralta throws a predominant four-seam fastball at around 95 miles per hour. That's what he uses to get over. That's what he uses early in the count to get up in a pitcher's count. And then he can start to utilize his off-speed pitches. His best off-speed pitch by far is his slider. And again, you talk about a lineup that, whether it's Mark Vientos potentially chasing some outside sliders, Francisco Alvarez, and our guy Pete Alonso, they're going to see a healthy share of sliders, especially if they miss that early fastball. Now, I think the Mets lineup did a better job yesterday in trying to hit the early fastball against Spencer Schwellenbach. They were swinging more often than the previous start out. But again, they just weren't really making that consistent contact, right? They were fouling it off or they were whiffing, and they weren't really making premier contact on that. Now, again, Freddie Peralta is not going to throw 97, 98 like Schwellenbach does. He'll throw 94, 95, maybe even touch 96. But you got to attack that early pitch. And I'm not asking for these guys to swing at first pitch every single time. Obviously, there's a method to the madness in terms of trying to build a pitcher's count, etc. I understand that because Schwellenbach was cruising, right? And there's situations that present itself in different parts of the ball game, etc. But really, when you take a look at this kind of pitcher, he's not having his best season, right? Yeah. He's floating around 3.6 ERA, somewhere in that ballpark. The K rate compared to last year in 2023 is down by about 3 to 3.5%, somewhere around that ballpark as well. So this is a guy that obviously you saw earlier in the season, to your credit, Rob. He dominated you. You didn't have a good time. It's a completely different team. You found a way to get it done in an electric game one victory in a doubleheader yesterday. Build that momentum, attack early, attack often, and please, 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 if you get a situation like Harrison Bader did yesterday to put the Mets on top early in the ball game, and twice even, right? Please take advantage of it. It's not rocket science, right? It was man on third, nobody out, or one out at that point. Infield was in, and he gets a first pitch off-speed pitch, right? I love first pitch hitting. I love it. But not in that situation and not against that pitch. If you hear me preach first pitch hitting, it's going to be against the fastball. It's going to be against the fastball. I'm not going to tell you to swing at a first pitch slider and beat it into the ground to third base where you don't do a productive job in terms of getting the guy in from third. So again, I want to see a better early approach because then you started to see the Mets come alive, especially in that 8th inning. And again, how did the Mets score, right? It was hits in bunches. It was bunches of hits. Just how the Milwaukee Brewers beat the Mets in game 2 when they won 6-0. When I was at the ballpark watching that debacle, you can win a variety of different ways. You can be electric and hit the long ball, or you can go ahead and it's like, what is the term that you say? Death by a million cuts or something like that, which is what the Mets did to the Braves in game one yesterday, late in the ballgame.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it was just, we talked about it on the post game so much that like the different emotions within like 45 minutes or so was just insane. And yeah, like, look, you can't have opportunities like that and not getting runs with runner on third with less than 2 outs. It's just fundamental baseball. And we preach this. And I've said over the last couple of games, fundamentally, if you make a mistake, especially with teams like the Brewers, the Braves, those teams are going to capitalize. Look what happened, right? Diaz didn't cover first, and what happened? It almost cost us game one in that series, in that 2-game doubleheader yesterday. It's the little fundamental things, defensively covering first, blocking the ball behind home plate, Bader. You needed a sac fly there, right? That was not a situation to hit on the first pitch. You're 100% right, Chris. It's like sometimes I think they're so focused on doing it perfectly and getting that run in that they lose focus on just the basic fundamentals of hitting. Like, it's crazy to me. Like, and look, nothing was really working out for the Mets through that, the first 6-7 innings. So, there was 9 men left on base when Schwellenbach was pitching. So, nobody really did the job at that aspect, but like Bader left on 4 guys out of the 9, right? You knock in 1 or 2 of those runs, or even 3 of those runs out of the 9, you might be talking about a ball game that didn't have to end up being as heroic as it was and crazy as it was. Could have been a different ball game, and we might have not been, ready for game 2 as Mendoza was ready for game 2. And this is what they got to fix. And can they do it this quickly? Who knows, right? They don't get a day off. The Brewers did. So you just hope that momentum just rides them right into today's game, right? They got into Milwaukee very, very early this morning. They had to be at the ballpark because MLB rules when it comes to the playoffs. Players and manager have to be there, I believe, 4.5 hours, possibly 5 hours before game time because of their the press conferences and interviews and all that nonsense. As well, the roster has to be finalized, and we're going to talk about the roster, not just the lineup, but the roster is very interesting. I brought it up in the group chat. Not many changes, but there is one that we're going to talk about a little later about the roster, but it's very interesting, and we talked about it, Chris, in the group chat. But if they play fundamental baseball, especially against a Brewers team that plays really good fundamental baseball, they don't make a lot of mistakes, especially the lineup wise. They're not a big, powerful home run hitting team. They are a strikeout team, but they bunt, they move the runner over, they steal bases. A lot of things that can just annoy the pitcher and annoy the defense on the field, right? They're a pesky team, and they're a dangerous team because they're pesky. So it's going to be very interesting. Severino's got to make sure that he pays attention to the runner because he'll focus on the batter too much and forget about the runner. And you got Alvarez behind the plate, right? You need Alvarez's bat in the lineup over Terren's, obvious, but you need Alvarez, who hasn't been good throwing out runners or blocking pitches, with Severino losing focus on the runner and then just focusing on the hitter, it could be a bad combination. So it's going to be very curious early on in this game to see how Severino reacts if there's a base runner going forward, Chris.
I was incredibly nervous when Diaz was out there with no control and Alvarez was just like behind the plate trying to do everything he can in his power to just stop the slider with the backhand picks and everything. I was just like, this has free bases written all over it. But no, I agree with you. Like, I'll obviously, and we brought this conversation to you all in terms of who's going to be playing down the stretch weeks back when people were calling for Alvarez to be benched, right? And we're like debating whether Terrence was going to take, the majority of Alvarez starts. And I was just like, why are we talking about this? This is Alvarez's job. This is his position. And whether he's struggling right now or not, this is the catcher of the future for the Mets. And he's going to be getting this opportunity. And guess what? His bat turned it around. But again, I agree with you. This is a pesky Brewers lineup, and it's talented. And honestly, like it's a hand-in-hand scenario where obviously if you get a guy like Bryce Terang on, he is a pest on the bases, right? I think he's got 50 stolen bases on the season. You always have to be worried about him taking off. But again, if you worry about the base runners too much and you lose focus of the bats, Willie Adames can put one over the fence. Reese Hoskins, who has been an absolute menace to the New York Mets, can put one over the fence. I believe Sal Frelick is also back from his I don't know. I'm not sure if he was on the injured list, but again, toward the bottom of their lineup, right? This is a pretty complete Brewers lineup.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with Luis Severino. And with Severino, we can see early on, right, if Severino's at the top of his game or not, especially with his command. Last time out against the Brewers, the Braves did not have his right, and all of his starts. You can tell when he's got that feeling going early in the first and second inning. He's pumping 97, even 98. He's feeling good. The sweeper is sharp, and we're getting that version of Luis Severino. I really hope that he goes out there and shows us that in the first 2 innings, limits the base runners, and hopefully, again, we're not having a situation where Terang's getting on for 4 times out of his 5 at-bats or even all 5 times like he did in that Brewers series, the Brewers-Mets series, over this weekend, and he's just stealing left and right because he's going to be hard to contain. But talking about this lineup here before we talk about this actual postseason roster, because obviously I know you're going to talk about Max Kranick and Tyler McGill. Obviously, don't worry, don't panic about Tyler McGill if you don't see him on the SNY Mets post about him not making the roster. He will be back should the Mets make the NLDS. Tyler McGill will be back. But again, he's not going to be pitching in a 3-game set when he just went in Atlanta. But I think a lot of people are surprised here about Jesse Winker in the 6th spot DHing. Obviously, he had an abysmal stretch in September. It seemed like Carlos Mendoza really did shy away from him. And it was kind of like, who is he going to throw out there in DH when JD Martinez, before he recently caught fire again, was struggling and looking abysmal? Jesse Winker was abysmal. Like, what are the Mets going to do with this DH position where they got 2 guys, one in the offseason and one at the trade deadline, and both of them are stinking up the joint right now? But Jesse Winker, for those of you all who don't know, is 3 for his last 42. Those were his September numbers. Absolutely putrid. He's got a habit of popping the baseball up recently. One thing about Jesse Winker that I honestly like, again, because I preach this philosophy, but I know a lot of people hate, is the fact that he does swing at a first pitch a lot of times. And it's annoying, right, when he's popping them up. And I will agree with that. But again, if he's having success with it, nobody's going to complain. But he just needs to get back into his zone, man. He really needs to get back into his zone. I feel like he's been a little bit anxious up at the plate, and he's been expanding the zone recently, especially on those high pitches that are above the letters. Again, as a lefty, you're going to have a natural uppercut swing, as does Jesse Winker. And if you're swinging at that high pitch, right, you're not going to have much success with it. So he's got to maybe be a little bit more selective. And he's really the case where I will go and sort of, push back on myself in terms of swinging early in the count. Maybe Jesse Winker should take a pitch, especially if it's up in the zone in the first couple of pitches of his at bat. But again, the splits are what they are. He's got around a 780 OPS against righties, and versus lefties, it's under 600, or it's under 700, I should say. This is maybe an opportunity, right, where Mendoza is giving him a last chance to try to prove himself and why he would be valuable for the Mets in an NLDS type scenario. If he doesn't, I could see a situation where he doesn't even make the roster, should the Mets advance past the Brewers, because you have JD Martinez. He's hot, right? I know it's righty on righty, but who cares at this point? The guys that are hot are going to play. And you see it with Starling Marte here coming late into the game in game 1. Obviously, Bader got the start over him, and Marte made the productive at-bats happen with 2 base knocks and keeping the line moving in game 1 yesterday. So, again, this is probably Winker's last opportunity in my mind to make an impact for this team at the DH spot. You're not going to play him over Tyrone Taylor. I don't think at this point you're going to play him over Starling Marte.
Yeah.
So really the only guy who you're going to have the ability to replace is JD Martinez. And at this point, I can't say that I love it because the way that JD Martinez is swinging the bat right now, I don't care if it's a righty, I don't care if it's a lefty on the mound. He's the veteran guy. He's been in these situations and he's swinging a hot bat. And he got out of whatever funk he was in. So again, I like Jesse Winker. We'll see what kind of at bats he turns up today, but it's a case by case basis with him. This might really be his last shot.
Yeah, and you know what we saw yesterday in game one with Mendoza when it came to Bader, as soon as Bader failed both times with runners on, as soon as the opportunity came up again where you needed a hit and needed some offense, he replaced Marte in Bader's spot and pinch hit him. And you know, I think he's gonna do that with Winker. If Winker looks bad 2 times through the lineup and the Mets need some offense, I wouldn't be shocked if Martinez comes into the ball game as the DH. And yeah, you know what? You usually go with the hot hands in the playoffs, and that's why it's a little interesting why he's going with Winker. And John brought it up in the chat. Winker's 6 for 18 with 2 home runs against Freddie Peralta. Maybe Mendoza's trying to get Winker's going here with a guy that he's seen and has been good against. And look, Mendoza's smart like that. He knows that Winker is going to be a big part of this bat coming off the bench in games, depending on how far, in this series. If there's a righty on the mound and JD Martinez, if he's having a bad night, you could pinch hit a lefty or somebody else in this lineup as well. If Marte, pinch hit, if he's not looking good, there's so many opportunities here. And look, Winker was supposed to be the first guy off the bench when there's a righty coming in, batting for a right-hander, depending on the situation. He wasn't supposed to be our starting outfielder, or in this case, a DH. That wasn't the case. He was supposed to be the best bat off the bench. And that was the key. But because of JD Martinez struggling and Bader struggling, Winker was getting more opportunities. And, he hasn't been good. So, Mendoza, I'm not going to say he's wrong in this aspect. We know why he's doing it. Because of the numbers that John put up there in Pure Adrenaline Sports. And, of course, he probably wants another lefty in this lineup with Peralta. Because if you take Winker out of this lineup, and I know we're not big on lefty-righty. We just like the guys that we believe are going to do the best in the lineup and who's been the hottest, or, at least lukewarm in Martinez's case. You only got Nimmo and Lindor. Everybody else is right-handed. So I think he wanted another lefty in that lineup today. And again, he can adjust on the fly just like he did in Atlanta yesterday. So I think he just wanted another lefty, right? After Nimmo, it would have been righty, 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 righty. So, that's probably his idea. He probably wanted to break it up a little bit. So, when the manager, if Murphy brings in another right-hander, or another left-hander, he can make an adjustment there, or another right-hander, he can make an adjustment, put in another right-hander for Winker, such as JD Martinez or Luisano Acuna, who is also on the roster, by the way. So it's a little interesting. I was a little shocked by that because I did get a couple of people saying, oh, he's playing a hot hand. Then why is Winker in there? And, with the numbers against Peralta and the extra lefty in the lineup, I think that's probably what he's doing. But don't think for a second Mendoza is not going to make that move, switching Martinez for Winker, for Winker for Martinez. I think that could happen rather quickly if Winker doesn't look good against Peralta.
And I think that MEZ in the chat was asking how many lefties are in the bullpen for Milwaukee. I think the answer to that, and I didn't really look at their postseason roster in full, is like maybe 2. One of them is not really great, so he's not going to be utilized in high leverage situations. But I think the point that you're trying to make here is that no matter if it's a righty or a lefty coming out of the bullpen, if Jesse Winker looks abysmal in his first couple at bats, it doesn't matter what pitchers out there on the mound, whether it's still Freddie Peralta or anybody else in that bullpen, whether they're righty or lefty, JD Martinez or anybody else on the bench is coming in for Jesse Winker. Because again, the Mets can't afford bad at bats. Not the type of at bats that he's been taking, at least recently, especially with the other guys getting hot, right? You need to put your best foot forward out there. And again, I really do think that this is his last opportunity to show something here. I love the vibes that he's given this clubhouse. good team guy, great energy, but again, that production just simply hasn't been there. So we'll see what happens tonight. Now, I'm really closely watching his at bats tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be a key, right? He's batting sixth. So, it's not technically in the middle. It's like the lower end of the middle of the order. And look, with Marte and Taylor behind him, maybe that gives him a little bit more pitches to hit. Who knows? We don't know how Peralta is going to attack this Mets lineup. You'll see in the first inning, obviously. But when it comes to the lineup, we also got to talk about the roster. When the roster came out, I didn't think anything was going to be, crazy, any changes or anything like that. And I'm looking through the lineup and I'm like, okay, they're carrying only 4 starters. Makes sense. And then I'm like, okay, I knew Tyler McGill wasn't going to be there. Who do they put in? Then I start looking at the relievers and I see Max Kranick. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, where did that come from? And then I'm like, that makes perfect sense. You don't have a long man if you're going to be using Buto in late inning games for like an 8th inning or a 7th inning. Buto's probably not going to go 2 innings most likely because you're going to need him for at least 2 out of these 3 games at the very least, maybe even 3 games in a row. So I don't think he's going to pitch more than 1 inning in any of these games unless it's a dire circumstance. With Diaz obviously not available today, you would think the closer for today is either Stanek or Buto. I think they're going to lean towards Buto and Stanek in the 8th inning, but that can flip-flop either way. And then you got to worry about how far does Severino go. Hopefully at least 6 innings so you can, work with only 3 relievers, 7, 8, and 9. But with Max Kranick, he's the Swiss Army knife. And I said that in the group chat, Chris. He started 8 games this year, and he relieved in 45 of them. So he's pretty decent in both areas. And I think the Mets are needed a guy who can come in and give you innings. Just in case if Luis Severino doesn't have it, you can't leave him in there for 4 innings, 5 innings, just to, waste innings and, not waste bullpen arms. You can't let the game get away from you because you're one loss away from being eliminated. So if Severino doesn't have it tonight, Max Kranick's coming into the ballgame. It's just that simple. And I was looking at his reliever with his reliever stats as well. In those 45 games, he's came in and be a long man 16 times. So he's pitched 3-4 innings, in a week, with two or 3 different games. He'll pitch 2 innings, 3 innings here, like Budo was doing early on. And then they slowly took away Budo's extra innings because they think he's probably better, 3 games straight, 1 inning apiece. And Max Kranick can do everything. So if you need him, just in case you don't want the game to get away, you can throw him in there for a couple of innings and see what he does. So that's an interesting roster move, Chris, but I like it. It makes a lot of sense when you think about it.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think that's the only situation that we'll see Max Kranick in. I don't think that they're going to trust him in any sort of if anybody's expecting any high leverage situation out of Max Kranick, I would just probably not expect that. I think the 3 guys that you have in the bullpen with Edwin Diaz not available that are going to close out the ball game should the Mets be in a position to win tonight is obviously going to be Jose Buto potentially, right? Reed Garrett is another name that has shown you he can either get the 7th or the 8th. And then again, Stanek, with him being the guy that was warming up with Edwin Diaz in trouble and presumably, not getting that 9th inning until he basically told and demanded, Carlos Mendoza put him back out there for the 9th, saying he's got this shit.
Yeah.
That signifies to me at least that Stanek is probably going to be that guy for the 9th. Would love Jose Buto in a a high leverage situation. Have always believed in Jose Buto, even in his downward swings this season. I still believed in him. I think he's got a lot of energy. But again, I think the only way that we see Max Kranick in this game is mop up duty for a Luis Severino if he doesn't have it over 3 or 4 innings, and then Max Kranick comes in, maybe eats up 1 or 2 innings. I think Adam Ottavino also, as much as I've crapped on this guy all season long, has actually been decent in terms of providing some mop-up duty. We saw him in game 1 yesterday. He got the job done. And at that time, it all seemed like Mendoza was kind of like, all right, go out there, do what you want to do. We're going to focus on game 2. but the offense finally came through, and you can't overlook Adam Ottavino pitching a scoreless inning. Now, I'm not going to tell you that Adam Ottavino is going to all of a sudden be a high leverage inning situation option for Carlos Mendoza, and that Carlos Mendoza believes in him. But I agree with you. If you were going to have Tyler McGill off this roster, obviously the Mets are only carrying 4 starting pitchers in this 3-game set, with McGill being the last one essentially to go in Atlanta, outside of Joey Lucchesi. Then yeah, you needed a viable bullpen option. And I think that the name has been long forgotten in Max Kranick, because we were excited in terms
Yep.
of what he could provide. Obviously in spring training, and then that unfortunate injury situation happened, and then he kind of had to rehab there. And honestly, I'm not going to lie, I haven't really been paying attention before I just saw his name in terms of what he was doing down in the minor leagues. But like you said, he's been doing it all, right? He's been starting, long relief, bullpen appearances galore. So we'll see, but I don't expect any sort of high leverage. I'm not saying that's not what you're saying either. But again, I think that if worst case comes to worst, something happens where Luis Severino doesn't have it, whatever, he has to exit early. You got Max Kranick as a fallback guy. And yeah, that's actually good to see, because I think he's also a native New Yorker, right? I think he grew up in the New York area too. So this is probably a
I think
feel
like
good for
I don't know if it was upstate or maybe it's Westchester or something like that around that area. I think so. Yeah, he's I believe he's in New York, somewhere tri-state at the very least. But he might be in New York. You might be right about that. Maybe upstate. But yeah, and you're right about the with Diaz and probably Maton not available tonight. It's going to be a combination of Buto, Stanek, and Garrett 7, 8, and 9 if the Mets are either tied or having a lead. So, or even down a run. You're going to see those big guys, those 3 guys in particular. And, Danny Young might be coming up against one of those big lefties. One of the left. Yeah, I know. But, I mean, you know what? And this is the problem with losing Raleigh and Diekman being terrible and having to DFA him. Having a guy those 2 veteran guys, and Raleigh was a big loss for this Mets team in this bullpen. I mean, he would have been. I mean, how good would our bullpen would have been if Raleigh was healthy?
Yeah, it'd
And
be
then again,
insane. That was a huge
yeah,
loss.
yeah, and we still haven't found a good lefty. Like Danny Young was good for a little while, but he walks the ballpark. He has a huge problem throwing strikes. And can you pitch him in a spot where you need to get a lefty out? Mendoza's going to have to do that at some point, probably in this series. I haven't really looked at the roster for the Brewers much, but we just seen them. I'm not sure how many big power lefties they have. They got a lot of punch and Judy hitters that are slap hitters that are mostly lefties. So that doesn't work well with guys who probably can't catch it to a fastball, but you speed up their bat with the junk Danny Young puts up there. So not only doesn't throw strikes, he doesn't throw hard enough to blow past these guys that are basically slap hitters and finding any way to get on base. They're not going to probably hit the ball over the wall. So it's going to be a tough situation. You just hope that Reed Garrett's really good against lefties, so maybe he'll go that route. But there's going to be a spot in this series. I honestly feel that way, that Danny Young is going to get an opportunity against maybe in this game against a lefty if the opportunity comes up. So not having a confident lefty or even 2 lefties worries me a little bit in just the playoffs in general.
Yeah, and it doesn't help, like you said, like he's got good stuff in terms of the off-speed movement. He doesn't throw hard, but he just can't throw strikes. And now with the 3-batter rule, Ron was saying on the broadcast yesterday, do you bring him in to face Olsen? And then Gary's just like, well, no, because you have to face 2 more batters after that. So there's not really any point to it. So that makes having a quote unquote lefty specialist hard, with them having to face the 3-batter minimum rule. But Cameron's asking in the chat, is Kranick going to start a game? Absolutely not. He is not going to start a game in the playoffs. No,
Unless
not
somebody gets
even
trapped.
close. Yeah. And that's kind of what I wanted, but that was a good segue, though. It was a good question, because I wanted to segue this into this topic of how would you configure this rotation after Severino? Obviously, he's getting the ball in game 1. If you win, do you try to close the series out with Minaya tomorrow? Take your chances with Jose Quintana? Like, what would you do? Obviously, you have David Peterson potentially as well. So I don't really know. What would you do?
So I would just pitch Manaea tomorrow, regardless, because either way, it's either going to be an elimination game or a clinching game to get to the next round. So who would you want to clinch that game? Now, all right, you probably won't have Manaea for game 1 of the divisional series, but you'll have a couple of days off. If you win 2 in a row, right? I think you'll have 1 day off anyway. So, and Manaea is only going to have 2 days. I want Manaea to at least be available for at least game 3. If you pitch him in, if you hold him out and you don't pitch Manaea in the series and you lose 2 in a row because you pitch Severino and Quintana, not having Manaea in any of these 2 games, there's going to be a lot of questions. We haven't questioned Mendoza a lot this year. That's a big question for Mendoza. If your best pitcher in the season didn't get a start in any of the 2 games and you get swept in this series just because you wanted to hopefully hold them out for game 3, possibly game 1 of the divisional round, I think you have to pitch Manaea in game 2, either elimination game.
What if you win tonight, though? What if you win tonight?
He wasn't on full rest, though, right? That's the issue.
Who, Manaea?
Yeah.
No, Manaea's good. Tomorrow is Manaea's 5th day. So you could either extend him to the 6th day in game 3, or if you take game 2 or game 1, you can try to just go full throttle in game 2 and pitch Manaea on regular rest. Because I think he went Friday. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, that's the 5th day. Wednesday's tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, so you're right. Well, so he would pitch.
And then David Peterson probably wouldn't even be an option in this series potentially because he pitched on Sunday. So his regular rest wouldn't even come up.
If Manaea pitches tomorrow, you're right, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So he would pitch game 2, right? Because of the off day?
Yeah, I think so.
There's an off
like
day,
that.
and then you play the game 1 and game 2, and then there's an off day for travel, right? So he would pitch either game 2 or 3 in the divisional round.
Yeah, I think there's something like that. I think you're right.
But what I'm thinking is that I don't think Mendoza can. I'd rather pitch Manaea in game 2 in this series. I don't think you can not pitch him, because if you lose and you say, okay, we're gonna throw Quintana out there, it's similar to the Braves situation yesterday, right? Could you pitch Severino in game 1 and then just use McGill in game 1 today? I think it was a similar situation, but you had that security blanket of the doubleheader in game 2 to advance. In this situation, if you don't use Manaea tomorrow, I don't know. It's so risky, because if you get swept and you don't pitch your best pitcher, it's like, and even though Quintana's been really good, Manaea is your best pitcher, and to not pitch him in the first 2 games is like I don't know if I would go that route. I would trust Quintana going into game 3 in an elimination if we split the first 2 games, right? Because
he did pretty well last time in Milwaukee too. So I mean, I agree with you.
And look, it's all hands on deck at that point in game 3, right? Everybody's going to be available. If Quintana doesn't have it in the first 2 innings, he's out. You might even see David Peterson piggyback him.
I was going to say David Peterson could be ready by game 3 to pitch a couple innings.
Technically it would be his throw day officially, so he can throw 30 to 35, maybe even 40 pitches and still be ready for game probably 3 or 4 in the divisional round because of the off days. So, you'll have 2 off days in the first 4 days of the divisional round. So, in 6 days, you have 4 games. So it would work out in that favor. Now, you probably lose Quintana until game 5 or 6, possibly, depending on the other off days. I'm sorry, game 5 or 6. Excuse me. You might have to use Quintana in game 5, but you might have to use either Manaea or Severino on short rest for game 5 that we've seen a lot of teams do over that time. But, we're getting ahead of ourselves, technically in the division series, but it is a big question, right? If you don't use Manaea tomorrow, now, if you win, maybe you can think about pushing him to game 3, but then you lose him a little bit in the divisional round. So I don't know if they want to do that or not. I think either way, win or lose, they're probably going to go with Manaea tomorrow and
That's
Quintana
what I think too.
in game 3.
It was just It was just a kind of a question on my mind too, because we saw the Mets in the wild card, round against the Padres kind of maneuver their rotation around in that Padres series a little bit. So that was kind of on the top of my head. But again, I really think that no matter what, definitely if you lose today, Manaya's got to go game 2. But hopefully Sebi gets the job done. We're talking about a win. Like I'm pumped right now. I mean, it's almost 4:15. Game time is like what? Just over an hour, something like that. This is awesome. This is what we've been waiting for. It feels so weird to me though, because we're
It
up
really
here
does,
at
right?
4:15 p.m. where we have like a five. What is it? What's the official first pitch today? Is like 5:20, something like that?
Yeah, like
Or is it 5:30?
5:26 or some nonsense like that.
That's so weird to me. Like that's so weird to me. It's like, are we playing playoff baseball? It's not a 7 o'clock, 7:30 start time. Anyways, tomorrow 7:30 we'll get back into our regular groove. But again, hopefully the Mets got their rest. Hopefully they celebrated accordingly. It was kind of funny and fun to see Severino at one point saying, "All right, I'm celebrating with water now," because he knows he's got a game to pitch tomorrow. So
Yeah,
again, the MLB with these damn short turnarounds, like
yeah,
absolutely insane. But you know what? It is what it is. That's the task, and that's the hand you're dealt. And the Mets got to go out there and just pedal to the metal, man. I'm tired of struggling against the Brewers, man. Thing against the Braves is that the Brewers have had the Mets number. They are a
yeah,
scrappy team. They play baseball the right way. And you know what? So do the Mets. But again, you take a look at like so many missed opportunities in game 2, especially in that Brewers series. There was a handful of times where this offense had a runner on second, nobody out, and couldn't score.
yeah.
You need to take advantage of those situations and produce in this wild card series, or you're going to be shaping up for another disappointment. So get the job done. I believe in this lineup. Yes, we know Jesse Winker's in this lineup. We know he's 3 of his last 42. Who cares? Go out there and get the job done. Change the narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, if you play fundamental baseball against the Brewers and you play their game, basically, you're gonna have a chance to win. You can't make silly mistakes. You cannot not cover first. You have to, play sound defense because again, just like the Braves, the Brewers capitalize on mistakes. They've made a team based on capitalizing off of mistakes, right? They don't have the best roster. They don't have the biggest power hitters. The lineup 1 through 8 is just tremendous. They got a lot of guys that bat 215, 230, nothing special. If you look, we talked about it on the post game multiple times in the first 2 games. You look at their averages, 215, 220, 230, nothing special. But then you look at their runners in scoring position, over 300. Like that's the huge difference right there. They capitalize on run producing opportunities. And if you make a mistake and you allow them to get runners on base or specifically get runners in scoring position, 7 times out of 10, they're going to put those runs in. So you got to be smart here. You got to know the play before it even happens. I think too many times this year with a couple of defensive, mishaps, even if they catch the ball, where to throw the ball. What do I do? Yesterday, with Edwin Diaz yesterday, right? That's PFP. You learned that in spring training. You do that every spring training. You do that probably earlier in the season a couple of times just to remember it. That's something. Anytime the ball's hit to the right side, the pitcher needs to gun it to first, even if it's looking like it's hitting the second. You always do that. And on top of that, Alvarez didn't even, try to. He moved last minute, but he was also having to back up at least first base a little bit because you never know what can happen in that situation. If Pete Alonso thinking that Edwin D was going to be there, he could have thrown the ball away, and God knows what would have happened in that aspect, but he didn't, right? But simple fundamental baseball, simple PFPs like that, you can't miss that opportunity because the game would have never been that crazy if we got that final out, right? We could have been probably cruising to a victory, but guess what? It's the Mets. So play fundamental baseball, do your job, right? We say this all the time. How many pre-games have we said do your job, right? This is a good team. The Mets are a good team. The stupid mistakes will have you out of this playoffs very quickly. You got the momentum coming off of yesterday. The Brewers have been sitting. Sometimes when they sit, They might, it might take them a few innings to get ready. So you know what you do? You jump on them early. Get the Peralta early. Punch him in the face early. Get it done. Give Severino a lead. It's amazing what happens when a pitcher gets a lead. They actually feel more comfortable on the mound, except they have to be perfect if you don't. And I think that's the key. I honestly think that's the key to the series.
Yeah, and it's a great point too, because obviously we know the history, the historical values here. Obviously, if you just go and look at the numbers like Daniel did here on ESPN, right? Or wherever you're looking at the numbers, it's out there in terms of the data that this Brewers lineup that they threw out there today has had success in their careers, so whatever the numbers are, against Luis Severino. Like, they have had success against him, whether it's in a Brewers uniform or whether they were elsewhere and they saw Luis Severino. It doesn't matter. And vice versa, the Mets, outside of Jesse Winker, really haven't had success at all against Freddie Peralta. The numbers are pretty ugly. So we know that pitching, quote unquote, matchup, again, probably favors the Brewers. But the Mets have an opportunity, right? With the slate being wiped clean, this is no longer regular season. It's now 0-0, like people are saying in the chat, to change that narrative. Like, you have an opportunity to go out there. And not only because the Mets have shocked people already, you have an opportunity to go out there and drop some jaws, of people that were doubting you for this entire season. So I love the memories that this team has already made, have given us, the exciting times and the down times where we had to go through on stream and talk about the painful points of this season. But I'm not sure about you, Rob, or anybody else in the chat. I'm not done talking about this team. I'm not done doing these pre-games and these post-games. Obviously, we have by default this one tonight and two more. But let's make a hell of a ride here. And it starts tonight. The journey starts tonight. Let's do it.
Absolutely. And look, the Milwaukee lineup, you just said it, Chris, and I'm going to say the Milwaukee lineup since it's the playoff game. Just to have an idea, you got Terang, Churio, Contreras, Mitchell, Adames, Bauer, Hoskins, Frelick, and Ortiz. So, again, they kind of spread out the guys that could actually hit the ball over the wall a little bit. I'm a little shocked that Adames is not in the top 4, but he might have bad numbers against Severino. Hoskins batting 7th is a little weird as well, but as much as he kills the Mets. But again, this is a lineup. Again, we talked about it. Speed, they got power at the top of the order, but they just play good fundamental baseball. They're a team that puts fouls off pitches. They can frustrate you like crazy. Severino just can't get flustered, right? And we know. Look, we talked about big game. They call him big game Sevy, and he hasn't been big game Sevy at all. We've known the history of Severino. Big games in September as a Yankee, not very good. Postseason numbers, not very good. He already changed the narrative with himself this year, thinking that he was basically not a starter anymore, basically, in this league. That's how bad he was last year. So he changed the narrative, saying that he is good. Can he do it in the biggest spot available? And this is the postseason. But we'll see, right? We just don't know. And, a lot of these guys, there's a lot of prove me wrong type of guys. Look, they slayed the dragon. They exercised the demon against the Braves, Chris. Maybe because the Brewers have beaten our asses for a very long time, and then we haven't played well against them. Maybe we got to slay this dragon too. And then the possibility of the divisional series, we all know who we play if we beat the Milwaukee Brewers. It would be the first time in Mets history and Phillies history that they play each other in the postseason, if that comes to be. So, slay the other dragon. Milwaukee's the other dragon, and you got to get it done because there's no more excuses, right? I'm not satisfied that we made the postseason, right? It was nice. It was great, right? We got over that hump. We beat the Braves to get to the postseason. Wonderful. But it'd be very disappointing and a quick exit if we don't win this wild card series. Get me to the divisional round. And then you can probably say house money a little bit because I don't think this is house money, Chris. I don't know about you. I don't feel like this wild card getting in and playing this wild card series is house money. I think this is win. I think the divisional round is probably house money because the Cinderella team right now was the Mets until the Tigers are doing what they're doing right now. So I think get to the divisional round, and I think you're playing with house money.
Yeah, I don't even want to worry about house money. Just get to the divisional round. We'll talk about it afterward, and we'll assess the season afterward. But yeah, no, I agree with 100%. I guess I'll give some final thoughts here before we hop on out of here. Everyone knows, the long-standing statistic or whatever that the Brewers got going on with their wild card exits and their opponents going on to make the World Series. That's all fine and good. I'm not going to overly, exaggerate that point, because as a New York Rangers fan, they were telling me how many similarities this season had to seasons prior or whatever, that magical run prior, and it didn't come to fruition. So that's just honestly, hearsay at this point. It's a new season. You start 0-0. And that's it. It's time to do it. This is what we've been waiting for this whole entire season, ever since we've been making off-season content. Someone actually in my X mentions, came back to a comment. I don't know if they had a bookmark or not, but somebody replying to me that I said that Sean Manaea, back on January 24th, when I released a video about Sean Manaea and how I thought that this was the perfect signing for the New York Mets all the way back 9 months ago, right? They kept the receipt. And it's nice because, right, we were confident, Rob, in this team. And even if you weren't confident in this team in the offseason or at any point, doesn't matter. They're here now. They got a job to do. We're all Mets fans at the end of the day. And it's awesome to see this fan base rallying behind the team. And it's just great to see the energy that this team has in the clubhouse. Now, let's translate it. It's postseason baseball. There's going to be a lot of question marks that we have still potentially with the guys on this roster. They could be answered. They could not be answered. We don't know. But by the time we enter this post-game live stream tonight, we want to be talking about a victory, and we want to be spamming those W's in the chat. So hopefully we see you all in the post-game stream. I definitely appreciate you all. Smash those thumbs up buttons on this pregame, whether you're over on Rob's channel and his live chat, or whether you're over on my channel and my live chat. Make sure you drop the thumbs up on both streams, on the pregame and the postgame, and we'll see you all in just a couple hours time when we know what the final result is. It is Luis Severino versus Freddie Peralta. Let's go Mets. Get the job done.
There you go, guys. An hour until game time. Enjoy your last hour of no panic mode and biting your nails. Eat some food. Get a drink. Get ready for some Mets postseason baseball, game 1 in Milwaukee. Cheer on our boys. And let's go Mets. And hopefully we're talking about a W in the post game. Have a good night, guys. Enjoy the game. Let's go Mets. And we'll see you in the post game.
Let's go Mets.
Meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed